Hello, I'm Stuart Bowes, and this is the Net Hero podcast. Thank you so much for supporting us over the years. And if you've not come across our channel before, let me tell you what we do. The Net Hero podcast is part of FutureNetZero.com, a platform which believes that better business makes a better planet. We're all about people doing things that enable the planet to become more sustainable. That means reducing emissions. That means creating new things and products that we can all live and survive with, because at the end of the day, we can't hold back our development. We want a better planet, and I believe that business is the way for us to get that, by providing us products and services that have a lower carbon profile. And they're the kind of stories that we will be promoting on this channel. If you've seen and listened to our podcast before, you'll know that we've talked to scientists, academics, business people, but we're happy to talk to anyone who's trying to do their bit to make things different. And now, on to this week's episode. When I was a kid, I loved Spider-Man. In fact, my little one loves Spider-Man now. And insects are flipping cool, whatever anyone thinks. You know, they're most of the things that we grew up with. We're scared of them, we're fascinated by them, we can collect them, and in parts of the world we eat them. But how important will insects be in addressing something that is quite a serious part of our net zero challenge? The amount of protein that we will need as a species. Now, human population is growing, as we all know, almost exponentially. We're looking at probably by the end of the decade, 9 billion, maybe more. Those mouths need to be fed. And generally, we feed ourselves through plants and animals. The animal side of things needs to be fed itself. And that chain is either plants or other animals. But what about insects? Could they play a role in trying to feed us indirectly? And I'm not talking about insect burgers, that could be another subject for a different podcast, but could they actually be the source for feeding our livestock in the future? Well, an innovative company called Flybox is looking exactly into this and trying to create the scale of sort of insect farming as a feedstock for animals using waste organic material. And I'm delighted to say that Larry Koch, one of the founders, joins me today on the Net Hero. Larry, hello.
Hi, Sumit. Nice to be here.
Nice to talk to you. So let's go to the beginning of what we just sort of took there. Insects are, and I think there's the old adage, if you're an alien and you land on this planet, you'd want to talk to an insect because they're the most populous thing, right? Where do insects fit in to our food chain at present? Because before you start this business, you must have had a look at all of this.
Yeah, so my interest in insects goes right back to university days. So almost 10 years ago, I had the privilege of interviewing the first insect farming company, really, based out of South Africa, called AgriProtein, for a dissertation. Stumbled across them and then sort of tweaked my dissertation as I became more and more interested in what they were doing to basically just focus on that. But yeah, you summarized it really well in the beginning, in that the problem really is not necessarily the protein that we all like to eat, but the most of the protein we kind of consume as a human species is in the form of the protein we feed our animals, because there's obviously an inefficiency in, they eat 3 times as much as turns into their flesh, and so you basically have this situation where most of the protein is coming from these other sources, and the food system has a lot of challenges around supplying enough protein without causing damage to natural environments or challenges to natural environments.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah. That's where people started looking at alternative proteins. So there's been a big push in the food industry, really driven almost top down from the supermarkets, who are often the ones who are being kind of levied a tax against, saying, hey, why aren't you solving this? People are deforesting large areas of the Amazon to make soya. That soya is going into feed pellets to feed all the chickens here. And so, how can we make some alternative proteins that maybe have less of an impact on the environment? And so various things have been proposed. From one angle, insects are readily eaten by omnivores of all types. I mean, humans, like you mentioned, have insect burgers, but it's not, in some parts of the world, humans eat insects, but
they do.
Most omnivores are not as picky as we are. And, birds, chickens, when they peck around in the ground outside, are pecking for insects. Pigs eat insects very regularly. So it's potentially a very natural source of a high value protein, an animal protein, which, insects are an animal. They're higher value protein even than soya. And is there a way that we can make them readily available to the food industry? Because what insects eat, to your original point, is waste. So they eat where they sit in the ecosystem is in the kind of decomposer layer.
Yes.
So they're kind of like the shrimp of the land. They take everything that's kind of discarded, um, manures, everything, and that's what they actually eat. So they thrive in all the areas that make the rest of us animals sick or want to avoid.
Yeah,
They
you're right.
they eat that, and there's more insect biomass on Earth than there is mammal biomass by many times,
Mhm.
because we're just wasting a lot. Like, we're very inefficient in the energy we convert into our motion.
And that's the thing. I mean, insects are incredibly efficient, aren't they?
They're very efficient. Yeah. Yeah. It's
So
usually measured in terms of their feed conversion. So
yeah,
how
their
quickly they
growth
can.
is incredible,
Yeah.
isn't it? Because they've grown. So let's talk about a few things. I mean, obviously, everyone wants to talk about insect burgers. I might leave a little bit of that to the end, but let's stick to where we are now because it's quite fun anyway. Um, right. If you look at the agriculture business at present, there are
Mm,
two sources of protein that people go for around the world. There's plant proteins and there's animal proteins. And some
yeah.
animals, like herbivores, we feed the plant proteins. Now, assume that the insect side of this won't address feeding cattle and feeding sheep, etc. But as you said, pigs, chickens, other things do eat an omnivorous diet. How important or how are those animals being fed at present? So
Mm,
if we've got chickens are most animal, I think, on the planet, right? So and most people will have seen pictures of chicken farms, and the idea is you can see that they're giving grains, but often they're giving pellets, they're giving other things.
hmm
Where do you see the use of insects, and is it quite common already, or is it just something that's kind of coming up, which is why you looked into it as a business? Because I think if I went back 20, 30 years, I don't think I'd think of anyone feeding their hens and chickens, insects.
So yeah, the insects themselves are usually processed into powders. So when you look at the major feed millers who want to incorporate alternative proteins,
Yeah,
they would get supply of soy meal. So that's the soy plant is dried and then ground into powder. Same with fish meal. There's things like bone meal.
yeah,
The blood meal. There are a couple other things that are approved that have protein in them. The difference is soy is a plant protein. Soy is a wonder plant, by the way. I'm not knocking soy.
no, no, of course,
It totally makes sense why we went down that route, because it delivers a lot of the amino acids that
yeah,
animals need for a plant. It's actually pretty good, and it grows very, very fast. So it's quite an economical plant too. But some animals, for instance, carnivorous fish, they can't eat that sort of thing. So if you want to do some of
yes,
these the farmed fish that people like to eat, they actually need to eat fish meal.
of course,
So about 20%, let's say, of the protein that goes into animal feed pellets or the animal feed industry will be animal based, to either supplement an omnivorous diet to get a healthier, nicer meat, or if you go really on the cheap route, people just feed them soy. So you can get away with feeding pigs and chickens a pure soy diet and not even worry about feeding them any bit of animal protein. So insects in those areas would be a way of adding value. If you can get the price low enough, you could actually get better meat, better growth rates, better health outcomes, better well-being for the animals. If you could do that at no extra cost, that's a really win-win. That's a win for there. And then on the fish farming side of things, it's very much they have no choice but to feed animals.
of
And so
course.
hopefully you could then actually compete with fish meal and outcompete it, and then deliver a more efficient, sustainable feeding system for certain types of fish.
I don't know if you know this, but what is fish meal at present? Is it just actually ground up other fish, or what do they eat?
Exactly, yeah, and also fish guts as well. So
Right.
what comes out of the factories, they often dry that and grind it. So yeah, offcuts, byproducts from the kind of fish processing industry, as well as catch itself, actual like bycatch and stuff like that. Yeah, so not the fish we would want to eat directly,
No,
basically.
understood.
Yeah,
So I think you've been going for about 3 years or something like that,
yeah,
3 or 4 years. Let's talk about what you do. And to the listeners and viewers, you're basically creating a kind of insect farms that are modular. Is that right? Can you explain a bit about what it is, and then
yeah.
where would you use it? And the other important thing that I'd like you to cover is what is the stuff that they eat? What's the organic material?
Right, right, right. So yeah, so I mean, in terms of us as a company, we basically build insect farms for people, but we're geared towards a modular solution
Yeah,
that is that can fit into different types of configurations, different applications for different industries, and we can kind of get into those later if you want, like some of the industries where it makes a lot of sense. But essentially, what we do is someone says, I have a waste stream, or I would like to start insect farming and I want to start small and I want to build up, and we basically provide the tech that can do that.
just to interrupt you there. So, what would be the waste stream? So, who would come to you, and why would they need the insect? Would they have animals then? I assume to feed.
So the kind of industries that are interested in are animal feed,
Yeah.
livestock farmers, and waste management. I'd say
Ah,
the last of those waste management companies are the most interested and most natural and the natural user of this kind of tech. So you have many companies out there that are in the operate in the waste to value space. So whether that's waste to energy or resource recovery of some sort, but most of the waste that comes out of food processing factories or even like municipal waste doesn't just go to landfill. If you're talking about the global north, it doesn't just go to landfill. It goes to these companies that are then trying to get energy out of it through
of
biogas,
course.
maybe
Yeah.
incinerate it and make energy. So there's various waste to value streams, which is great because it's not then just a cost to remove. It's a value add thing. And so insect farming fits into that space, but because of the nutritional requirements of insects and the regulations around what you can feed insects, I mean, they'll eat anything. They'll eat human sewage. They'll eat,
Of course.
yeah, it's
They love
just
a poo. They love
they
to
love a
munch on a
poo.
poo.
They really do, yeah. And in fact, it's been shown repeatedly that it's safe for them to eat that because that's literally what they
Yeah.
do in nature,
Yeah.
But
But we're not allowed to do that here. Is that right? You were saying.
the regulations are very cautious in the
So
UK and
even our insects are not denied poo in this
yeah,
country. I love it.
exactly,
The
yeah,
nanny state. Sorry,
yeah,
bug, you can't eat that. I like it.
yeah.
But so the waste, I mean, that's basically what you're saying is waste to value. So if you are I don't know, an agricultural waste business or your processor, that waste you've got to get rid of and do something with it. You can grow
Exactly.
these insects and then you can sell them on. That's what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. And so it's not
Gotcha.
necessarily that this would be a silver bullet that replaces everything else,
No,
but it's like you can daisy chain a lot of these solutions together. So like for instance, there's people we talk to that have, waste streams come in to fire their biogas, which produces very cheap electricity,
of
or
course.
gas,
Yeah.
for that then can run an insect farm for a reduced cost, which takes their other waste streams that then creates protein that they sell, and it creates a frass fertilizer that goes back into the biogas digester to fire start it and be even more efficient. So there's like all these daisy chains that you can do. It adds another brick into the kind of option set for a waste to value player where they can at scale now just recover more of the resources and use their systems together to just become more profitable. And the more profitable they are, the lower waste collection fees go, the more waste is then incentivized to be collected, and of course the amount of protein that's being produced sustainably goes up to replace the soy. And so it's critical that those players, I think, go into this first because they have the expertise in
Yeah.
waste streams, handling waste streams, processing waste streams, what's good for what. And I think a lot of the other players in the insect farming sector have essentially tried to build like a massive factory and basically build a waste management business on the
Well,
side of
that's
it.
already there.
Whereas,
Exactly. Yeah. I understand
yeah,
what you're saying.
whereas
Yeah.
we took the approach of we know insects, we know climate control, we know how to make the tech. Let's not build an insect farm ourselves. Let's empower people that have a natural arbitrage to go and do this themselves because they are not going to start an insect farming company, and it's damn hard as an insect farmer to build a waste management company.
So put the
So
two together. I get it. So
that's the idea, yeah.
let's describe it for the people who are listening and watching. So it comes like a trailer. Yeah. Can you visualize it for us and just give an sort of an audio description of what it would look like? So it's a trailer, and what one end you put in the waste material, so garbage, whatever, food waste, and then you put in bugs, or how does it work?
So it depends on what you need to do to process the waste. So we have the life stages in insect farming, like a butterfly, which is the easiest thing to think of, is
Hmm.
you've got the adult phase
Yeah.
when they're flying around, then they mate
Yeah.
and they don't eat in that phase. Their job is just to mate. They lay eggs. Those eggs then hatch into neonates, which are like little maggots, and they grow from very small to very large very quickly on organic waste. And so if you've got their nutrition really sorted, and the particle size. There's all sorts of environmental characteristics that you need to
Sure.
account for to get optimal feeding. And so if you do that right, in 6-7 days, you can have maximum development, and you can then
So you
harvest
get
that.
larvae, basically.
You get larvae, yeah.
Yeah.
And so most, let's say 99% of them are being harvested to make your products, protein, oil, live larvae, frozen larvae. There's lots of different buyers of those, which we can get into. But then a few percentage of them are allowed, if you like, to stay on one side and actually mature into pupa, which is like
To become your
cocoon
adults to
stage, to
start it
become your
again.
adults. And yeah, and
Got it.
so it's basically like you need a few percentage of them to keep the breeding population cycling, and you're harvesting most of the eggs are being put towards the productive use. So we provide the tech to breed larvae, to put them into a nursery, to let them pupate. We also have the tech for where you put the waste in. So there's different modules that we produce depending on if you're building a full insect farm, with entomologists,
Gotcha.
or we have partners that can do all of that for you. So we've got a partner that will just do all the breeding, and they'll deliver to you every month a pack of the baby larvae, ready to eat waste. So if you're a waste manager, for instance, you don't need to do breeding, which is complicated.
Yeah, I was
You
going to
just
say.
subscribe to the seedlings. You're basically filling trays with your waste porridge, which is, we can help, or they know how to make that nutritionally optimal. So they take their waste streams, they go through a mixer, they get pumped into trays. Those trays go on a forklift, and you put in little doses of the seedlings, so little caps of seedlings. So this much seedlings will eat that much waste in that tray. So you sort of pop them in, and then you stick them into what is essentially a 40-foot container, a 40-foot shipping container with doors. It's got AC, insulation, and a control algorithm that will then, regardless of what's going on outside, make sure that the climate inside and the airflow.
That's what I was going to ask. The temperature has to be right, doesn't it, for them
Yeah,
to hatch and everything?
temperature, CO2, ammonia, the local climate inside the tray, airflow is very important. How the air flows, how you change the air. So we've gone through the like R&D process of getting that environment, suitable for the insects at the various stages in the most power efficient manner. And so that's where our IP is kind of locked into, is like how to grow insects in this very compact environment, in these kind of modules, in these shipping containers. And so you can go as simple as, I don't want to do the waste processing, and I don't even want to do the insects bit. And we have a partner that will supply you with waste, and they'll just store it into a tank for you, and they'll come with it pre-processed, nutritionally optimized, all the accreditations, and they'll just drop it off at you. So you can literally start from,
So you can choose what you like.
I don't want to deal with waste, I don't want to deal with breeding.
Yeah.
I want to subscribe to both, and all I'm going to do is the growing and selling the products and finding a market. I'm going to make my own brand of insect scrubs. I'm going to make my own brand of fertilizer, and I just want to do that part. Or you can say, I've got the waste side, but I don't want to do the breeding, and I don't want to do the commercialization either. I just want to sell off the larvae to someone else that's selling them. So, what we've tried to do as a company is like build an ecosystem of suppliers, input providers, and off takers, so that wherever you sit and wherever insects make sense for you, you don't have to take it all on at the same time. And I think that's more of a kind of decentralized approach, is what we hope will spur the industry. A lot of people that are sitting on the sideline of like, I like this, but it's very complicated, will then just go, okay, the friction is a lot less now. And also the CapEx requirement is a lot less, because it's a single product rather than having to build a whole farm. You've got just a single container. It's an order of magnitude less investment. So we just figure that's going to get way more people interested in this. More interest from people that know their stuff about waste is only going to exponentially increase the uptake of this kind of tech and help it do the good that we hope it does in the world ultimately. So
I like all of this, and I think it's very interesting stuff, because the waste part of what we do is huge. There are two. I mean, I always discuss two things always come up here: is heat and waste, right? Because we're pretty good at kind of, well, we're not that good, but we've done a lot more in kind of our energy generation and renewables. But the waste is appalling. Quick couple of quick fire rounds. So, what sort of food waste is it, or is it plant waste? Is it waste from my chip shop? What goes in as this organic matter?
it could be anything that is either is decomposable and doesn't have cellulose. So you can't feed it, say, garden waste. So what they
Right.
won't eat is like leaves and things. But anything that would be in your food bin, anything that comes out of any food processor, anything that comes out of like spent grains, bakery wastes, everything that was once food, whether it's gone through your digestive system or not, can be used. Yeah, anything an animal can eat or has eaten is fair game. Yeah, yeah.
But they won't eat plants directly. That's quite interesting.
So they will eat plants that are edible. So
Right.
like it could absolutely anything that any animal can eat, I mean, any monogastric animal can eat, they can eat. Yeah.
Can it eat poo?
Yes.
But it's not allowed to in this country.
It loves they love poo. They love poo. But again, it comes down to nutrition. So if the animal in question has been fed a very poor diet
Yes.
without any protein, then its poo is going to be a very poor poo
Right.
for the insects. So
So you could give it slurry if it was the right kind of, you know, from the
absolutely.
right animal
Yeah.
farms that produce it. So you could. Is that allowed in the UK? It's not at present. Is that right?
So it's not if you want the insects to go back into the food chain,
Gotcha.
but if you were going to extract the oil out of them and make a biodiesel out of them, or
Yeah.
there's other applications that people are looking at, as long as it's not going to then be eaten, then you can feed them whatever. If you want it to be eaten by someone, you have to use various approved waste sources, which are technically they're not even waste sources. They're just like byproduct of
Byproduct.
other processes that
Fine.
are hygienic. Yeah.
Where did the insects go? You mentioned it earlier. Some people would sell them directly. Some people would give them to feed animals, feed fish. But there
Yeah.
are other industries around that would use that base larvae, would they?
There's many applications that are being looked at, from very simple to like quite scientific. The simple ones range from just the live larvae themselves sold, as you can directly feed them to animals as a supplement. You can freeze the larvae, you can turn them into a kind of puree. And that's a very big thing for the pet food industries. They really like kind of to make wet dog foods and wet cat foods. There's a lot of like sustainable pet foods that have been doing really well that incorporate insects. And I'd say the entire industry, including the whole of Europe, all the big factories they've built over there, I'd say 95% of the output goes into pet food right now. So that's the
Gotcha.
major application.
Yeah.
And the rest of it, some of the smaller players will do their own brand, like treats and things like that. The bigger players will supply, massive companies that are trying to make their pet foods more sustainable. The reason for that is just that they're a lot less picky pet food customers, whereas some of the animal feed customers, like if your
If
levels
you've
of a
got
certain
some, yeah, pigs or cows or whatever, yeah,
like the precision farmers,
yeah,
especially fish feed, like if your levels of a specific amino acid drop,
gotcha.
they'll be upset. And so getting that consistency right when you're dealing with a variable waste source can be challenging.
But the potential is there to go straight into the fishing industry. The potential is there to go straight into agricultural, animal farming as well.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, that's where it has to end, yeah.
You've built, I think, is it a test farm up in sort of Bedfordshire or Buckinghamshire? Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. Just outside Aylesbury. It's one of each of our modules. So it's what we call a 360 farm. So we do the breeding there,
Yeah.
the nursery, and the growing. Yeah.
How's it going? I mean, have people started using it? Are you selling it? What's going on?
Yeah. So we've got several sites in the UK planned, mainly with waste managers, as I mentioned. And then we're also based in Kenya, where the regulations there are just so favorable for insect farming. And we have actually quite a large site in Nairobi, and we have another breeding site going up in Uganda as we speak. It's actually our tech in a way is really useful in the global south, where some of the logistics issues, these things can be off grid. It's hard to get some of those contractors that build the massive factories in the north to kind of find the skill sets they need to do that in a place like Kenya, whereas our tech is very modular and kind of fits to that. There's also really good natural environmental climate
Of course.
in those
Yeah,
parts of the
yeah.
world, because insects need hot climates. So obviously we're in the north here, you have to heat them.
I was going to
Whereas
say.
in Kenya, you can get away with a lot lower energy bill by just having them in warehouses, just without AC for a lot of their life cycle. So it's more economical actually in the global south.
Let's talk about the carbon, which is what this is all
Yeah.
about. So obviously there is an energy cost. You've mentioned it. You've got to heat the things. You've got to have the right airflow and all of that. When you measure all of that, and I don't know whether you're getting green energy for that or whatever, but when you measure all of that compared to the carbon saving from not losing the waste, perhaps not burning the waste for feedstocks for animals and the pets or whatever, have you got any figures on kind of how much carbon you think this kind of insect farming can save?
Yeah. So a lot of people have looked into that. I mean, in terms of per box, we have kind of numbers of CO2, but we're actually doing a full scale LCA for our specific boxes, because it changes depending on where you are in the world, what kind of
Of
tech you're
course.
using, how much power that tech uses, how much automation you have. So there's no like one number necessarily that's agreed on yet. Like you couldn't go and get carbon credits for this yet,
No,
although
understood.
there's many plans afoot. But the main CO2 saving comes from every ton of insect meal produced is displacing a ton of essentially of soy or fish meal, and those have quite well calculated CO2
Ah,
impacts.
okay. And the insect one is a lot lower.
It's a lot lower, yeah, and the land use is,
That's a big thing, isn't it?
a fraction of a fraction.
Yeah.
And then there's the waste side of things. So the emissions associated with waste to landfill, you subvert those because you're putting it through the insects are eating it rather than it releasing methane, and so that's quite well understood, like how much gas is out during landfill versus during insects. And then you've got yeah, so that's the main two parts. And then there's also like transport associated with like getting soy from one part of the world to China for processing to back to the UK. So you've got like a sort of transport local.
And these, we haven't mentioned them, but I think they're on. Is it black soldier fly? Is that what it's called? That
That's
you
it. Yeah, that's the
uh,
main species that everyone uses.
and they're everywhere, are they? We get them in this country, or they just you get them shipped them in? I
You
want to
get
know.
them as far north in terms of in the wild, like as places like Croatia.
Okay,
You'll get them at southern Europe, like they're endemic in Spain, but they're mainly a tropical and subtropical species. They're allowed to be used here. You can ship them in, no problem. Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
So, where does this all lead us in 20 years' time? Are we going to have we'll still be eating animals, I'm assuming, because most
Yeah.
people will probably find it difficult to eat insects. Do you think that what you're working on now, is your aspiration that kind of will really sort of cut the carbon profile of what it takes to get our animals fed?
Yeah, I mean it's a massive challenge. Getting the protein system like less having less impact on the environment is going to be an extremely challenging thing. It's going to require death by 1,000 cuts, and I'm hoping that insect farming is one of those cuts. But the sheer quantities of soy is so staggering.
Mm,
But then again, the sheer amounts of waste that we're doing nothing with. Like if we look in Kenya, if you could process, I think we calculated it with a government there that we were talking to, that if you could process 50% of the organic waste currently sent to landfill across the country, you'd meet like something like 75% of the country's protein in animal feed needs. So they would
wow.
need to import 75% less soy and protein from outside. So, obviously in the West we've got a more developed waste to value, and in Asia more developed waste to value kind of ecosystem. So there's things like biogas, there's things like incineration. So you're kind of competing for feedstock. So
Understood.
really, if we want this industry to scale, the government is going to have to relax some of those feedstock limitations and say, look, because they're insects, they do a different thing. The evidence is now there. Let's let them eat waste, because the other wastes can go into AD or feed animals directly. There's this other category of waste that need to go to insects, and so that's what we're pushing for. We set up an association called the Insect Bioconversion Association in the UK, and we're really all the producers in the UK, which is about 8 of us, are aligned to the mission of relaxing the type of waste you can feed to insects, slowly, responsibly, like with evidence based, and doing it in the least disruptive way as possible. And so we're kind of trying to push that forward, because you
I
can't.
can I can see the T-shirt now. Let them eat poo. I like it. I
Yeah,
like it.
exactly. That's basically it. Like you can't set targets like zero waste to landfill
Of
and then
course.
be like, but it's too unsafe to use
No,
waste, so
understood.
don't use it. It doesn't make any sense. Like at some point we have to let nature just do what it does. Yeah.
I think your stuff is brilliant. I think it's very clever. I think it's great stuff for that. We can't leave anyone who's listening to the podcast. Go, come on then, can you eat the bug? So insect farming, and you mentioned it earlier. People are looking at insect. Parts of Asia, people eat insects anyway. They have done for generations. My personal view is it won't really catch on. It might do in some ways. If you get a burger that looks like a burger, you won't. Is it locust burger, whatever? But do you think actually that you're in there? You've got a background. I don't know if you're an entomologist, but clearly you know a lot about bugs. Do you think that kind of is really going to be a sideshow? Because converting us to
Yeah.
sit and eat a cockroach at our fine dining table, even in the bear, I don't think they could jazz up a cockroach too much.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. The edible species like that are nice is probably crickets.
Yeah,
Crickets taste quite nice. There's a few other insects. I think sideshow is the right kind of
yeah.
framing. it's not because I wouldn't like myself to enjoy insects, or like other people to like insects for the, some of the issues we talked about today.
Yeah.
But you just have to be realistic. Everyone knows, for instance, that beef has more of an environmental impact than chicken.
Absolutely.
But if you look at the rates of beef production and chicken production, the line goes up and to the right at the same rate. So if we can't even get people to switch off beef to poultry and fish, how on earth are we going to get everyone to swap off all of that to insects? I mean, it's just such a tall order.
So you're going the one stage below, which is to actually make sure that if we are going to eat those animals, they're fed as sustainably as we can.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the best well, that's one angle we can go at this from. And, I'm definitely a big defender of the of the livestock industry. I think they get a really bad rap. Farmers in general, they produce all of our food. These are not like crooks sitting there trying to work out. They run like really
No, they do.
difficult businesses and under a lot of constraints. And I just want them to know that there's other solutions out there where potentially it makes sense for them. And lots of them are looking into these things, but it has to stack up economically for the right people. And I think loads of them are open to it. It's just they need solutions. They can't just have demands. They can't just have restrictions. They need real solutions. So,
well, Larry, thank you very much for joining us. Flybox is the site, correct?
Yeah, flybox.bio is our website.
Check it out. Have a look. If you're in the waste industry, I think pick up the phone, give them a call, because I think it is a very clever idea. Larry, thank you so much for joining us on the Net Hero podcast. If you've got a thought on what Larry's doing and the general thought about how we're going to try and make our food chains more sustainable, drop me a line. You can email us. You can get in touch by emailing nethero@futurenetzero.com. Drop us a line on social media. Keep subscribing, and I'll catch you soon on the Net Hero podcast.
You've been listening to the Net Hero podcast with Sumit Bose from Future Net Zero. Visit our platform for all things net zero. And if you or your business is doing great things on the path to net zero and want to be featured on the podcast, email nethero@futurenetzero.com. Follow us on social media. futurenetzero.com. Better business, better planet.